Hello, Steve White, TrekBoy89 for Steve Arts89. Well, this is kind of interesting. With all the press that's been out there for the Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, we've seen a lot of, well, just recently, a lot of interviews with J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. Now, these guys, we kind of know, Star Trek fans, because they were at one point writing Star Trek 4, and it failed. It didn't happen. Now, there's been speculation as to the details of that script and also why it failed. Now, the basic idea that we understood was that Kirk and his father were going to meet, and no one really knew how. We all imagined it was going to be some interesting time travel phenomena or something. They, in some recent interviews, aside from the baffling fact that the only reason why they got the Rings of Power job was because JJ basically gave them a good word, and he convinced whoever was in charge at Amazon to give them the job even though they'd done nothing. They'd written some scripts that never went anywhere, and that's it. And for that they were given one of the most expensive and precious jobs in Hollywood. It doesn't make any sense. Now, I don't think the show is really bad or anything. It's kind of slow and not really anything happens. There's really no surprises. We sort of all knew what's his name was Sauron, and the other guy was Gandalf, and you were just sort of like watching things happen slowly. And yeah, so I get why a lot of people have a problem with it, but it's not the train wreck and dumpster fire that the haters are saying it is. But it does seem a little pointless. Just sort of like, well, we need to make a Lord of the Rings show, so let's just spend a lot of money and make it really beautiful, and, you know, that's kind of all they did. So a lot of people criticising them for that, and for the fact that, well, the implication that they don't have the experience to warrant the position, and then when you find out the only reason they got the job was because JJ basically got them the job, it does make you sort of kind of look at it and go, okay, that all makes sense. I can see why they weren't really prepared. It isn't great because they don't have the experience to make a really great show. They just don't have the experience. So there's all that. And I didn't really comment on that because people were talking about that and using that to just justify a bunch of hate and stuff about the show and all that. But they really are inexperienced, and they didn't do a great show because they don't have the experience to do that. They did an okay show, a passable show. But that's really not enough. You expect more from something like Lord of the Rings. But now we have this other interview where they were sort of saying, well, let's just tell people, you know, about Star Trek 4, since it's never going to happen. We may as well just tell them, you know, what we're planning. And I'm like, well, this will be interesting. So I opened the article thinking I am curious to see how they're going to do this. Because Kirk's father died in the first scene of Star Trek 2009, which was an okay film if you look at it as just an action-adventure film and not a Star Trek film or a science fiction film or even an intelligent film. I watched it 15 times in the cinema. I did enjoy it. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't. I bought some merchandise. I'm not going to pretend like I didn't. But yeah, it's just so stupid. And I was just, what? That these geniuses apparently watched Relics, the episode where Scotty traps himself in the pattern buffer of a transporter to survive being trapped on a planet on a ship that's crashed. And they thought, yeah, we'll use that. That's the idea we're going to have to get Kirk and Daddy Kirk and Baby Kirk into the same scene together, into the same film, to go on some sort of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade style adventure together. It's so stupid. He didn't try and beam out. They're saying, well, maybe he tried to beam out and his pattern was uploaded into the transporter, but they just never spat him out. So they found parts of the ship, the transporter, that was damaged, and they found his pattern in it, and they just pressed the button and he just beamed onto the ship, and then he's suddenly there in a different timeline, in a different universe. It's the stupidest thing I've heard for a long time, and I just was like, thank God these people didn't do the film. Thank God they didn't do a worse job of Lord of the Rings. And thank God they didn't get to do Star Trek, because this is the stupidest thing ever. Because he didn't beam over. We saw him sitting on the bridge saying, I cannot leave because I need to make sure. I mean, he could have given it to some little crew member to do, but he, as the acting captain, I have to make sure all the escape shuttles, including the one with my wife, with my baby, get off the ship, and I'm staying here till the last second because he was a hero. And it was a beautiful scene, and everybody freaking cried. And then they're like just making up that he tried to beam himself out, but he just didn't finish, so the pattern was still in the buffer. That didn't happen. And even if it did, God, every time you beam, you leave a pattern in the buffer. But that doesn't mean you can just make that into a person and have it cross time and alternative universes, which we all know the Prime Universe is not the same universe as the canon universe. It's a licensing thing. It's a literal space-time thing. People still deny it because I don't know why they're stuck on this idea that the JJ verse is the same. They need it to be the same universe as the original Star Trek universe and the Discovery universe, and they're all different universes. They're all got different copyrights and different licensing, and they're all written by different people, created by different companies at different times, but yet people would just seem to need for them to all to be the same thing. But this is ridiculous. It makes no sense. It didn't happen. It wouldn't work. And thank God these idiots didn't write this film, because it would. And I can see now why no one wanted to fund it. I mean, I understand the main issue price-wise was that Baby Kirk and Daddy Kirk were too expensive, but only because people didn't want to pay, because they knew they wouldn't make money out of it. A, because the other films didn't make money, and B, because it was a ridiculous, stupid story. Even the most basic person who's seen Star Trek would know that just because you beam through a transporter doesn't mean you can beam a person out using the old pattern. I mean, you need the actual person, the spirit, the whatever we made up of that's turned into data. Like, you can't just have a copy of that and produce the matter. It has to come from somewhere. You can't just make it out of nothing. It's not like a replicator. And yes, I know they've used the patterns to fix people with health problems and separate Tuvix or whatever his name was. But that was all in relation to the people being there, as well as different patterns from different times, and that you can't just make it from nothing. And it's just a stupid idea. They could have made so many interesting ideas. They could have had some sort of extension of or variation of the Nexus, or they could have just had a unique phenomena. Perhaps actually write a new thing. Maybe have a strange new world where time acts differently and they're able to, reunite them through that. There's so many interesting things they could have done. Instead, they just go, hey, let's just rip off Relics, even though it doesn't make sense with the scene in the film. Oh, God. I'm going to go. Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. These guys, why do they... How do these really, really white people with no talent get these jobs just because some other really, really white person, and yes, I consider JJ white even though he's Jewish, how do these people get these jobs, and the nepotism that keeps people with no talent in the industry? These guys have just been producing nothing, working on stuff that just never came out, never got produced, for years and years and years. They keep getting opportunities over and over again, and then they get given the biggest job in television history. And they don't do a great job of it. They did a passable job. It was okay. It just sort of happened. You just sort of watched it, and it was pretty interesting to look at, but there was nothing really there. Just, this is how Sauron showed up. This is how Gandalf showed up. This is why Galadriel... Well, actually, it doesn't make any sense with her character in the films, but you know where I'm going. Being a Star Trek fan the last 5... how long has it been? 7 years or something, is incredibly frustrating, because you are constantly being dealt with just the most baffling examples of stupidity from people, and none of it makes any sense how these people got their jobs, kept their jobs, thought that any of these things were good and would work, and how people actually can like think these ideas were good. You have these New Trek fans, Star Trek, say they're Star Trek fans, but they don't like Star Trek. They hate the original, they don't like Star Trek. How they can actually look at ideas like this and think, yeah, that'd be great. Let's rip off Relics. And have a scene that doesn't make any sense in relation to the movie that we've already watched. Just dismiss that canon, throw our own canon away for something that doesn't even make sense. It's just... I've got to go. I could just go on about this forever because it's just... Feel free to share, like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye.